Dear good global citizen, here is the font that I've created for myself and for you. And here is the story. After searching through the web for handwritten fonts, I realized that the ideal font that I was looking for just didn't exist. So I was driven to undertake the time-consuming work of creating a new and unique font of my own. Before creating even the first glyph, it took a long time for me to accurately know what aesthetic features I wanted. As for inspiration, I think it mostly came from paintings like this one by Seishu Toyo. Studying such great works of art paved the way for me to develop a precise visual taste. And the more I enjoyed them, the more I grew fond of this style that I would like to call elegant minimalism. By the way, this painting is known as the Winter Landscape. And to this day, it ranks as the most videolicious piece of art I have ever seen in my life. I think what makes this painting so satisfying to the viewer is the stunningly beautiful usage of negative space. Every time I see it, I keep watching it for a minute or two, as if it was a video, because there's this lasting sense of visual pleasure that emanates from perfection. The real painting itself is in Hitoland and stays most of the time resting in a museum in Tokyo. But of course, you don't have to be in Tokyo to study it and enjoy it. However, when you actually live in Hitoland as a font creator or a typographer, you get some interesting opportunities to expand your horizons. Mainly because Hitoland happens to be a place where one can closely observe the excellence of kanji or hanzi characters. When I lived in Hitoland, things got even better once I was able to hire a qualified shodo teacher to teach me the arcane ways of using a calligraphy brush. Truth be told, before hiring a teacher, I thought I could figure it out on my own. But making fine brush strokes turned out to be way more complicated than I thought it would be. So I started taking classes. After a few lessons, I was spending hundreds of pieces of paper to make the characters look like only moderately satisfactory. I felt challenged, but I also felt that a great amount of value had been added to me, not merely as an artist, but also as a person who could now observe the natural flow of his thoughts more clearly and who could establish cooperation between the layers of his mind a bit more skillfully. Because that is what you have to do to get steady with your arm and hand. You have to put yourself under discipline. Thankfully, the discipline that I acquired when learning how to write kanji has been very useful for the production of this font. Nevertheless, there has been an even greater calligraphic source of inspiration for this font, and that is none other than the much admirable Arabic calligraphy. In Arabic calligraphy, you don't use a brush, but you use a flat tip marker to apply ink to paper. And unlike brush calligraphy, where you have to constantly focus on how much pressure is needed in relation to the lines and shapes, you now have to focus on the rotation angle at the tip of the marker in relation to the curves and points. For instance, if you take a look at the letter W, you can see that it has this sharp end where you have to rotate the marker like not too much and not too little, also not too early and not too late as you approach the final movement of the marker. As for the curvature here in this part, which is called the eye of W, even advanced artists will find themselves getting better year after year. All in all, The task of putting every component just at the right place, where it belongs, requires a non-stop payment of attention with pure stillness in your heart, which is exactly the same situation as brush calligraphy. Interestingly, if you horizontally flip "woe" or look at lowercase e in the mirror, you may notice the slight resemblance. And indeed, the small e was one of the hardest ones during the creation of my Latin font. But if I were to name one letter that took more time than any other, it would certainly be the letter S. That is both the capital S and the small s. Because it was such a challenge to get that curve just right. I tried again and again and again, until I was finally able to reach the result that I was aiming for. The result that made my eyes happy. In the end, the font was complete with me having traveled back and forth countless times between the active search and the passive search of inner peace. And this good font is now available for you to download and use.